Thank you, Manjeet. I won't comment on the presentation just yet. I think we got about 25 minutes, so I keep the floor open. Please keep your questions and comments brief so we can have as many questions and comments as possible. Should we take three in a row and then, yeah? Okay, maybe the first one. Dr. Chaudhry first.
Very, very good presentation. Extremely stimulating. One question. Okay. Talking of systems, this relates to my original question. There is broadly one supreme system, according to you, which is Europe, Islamic, China. Under the supreme system, there are three systems operating. The Islamic, Ottoman, the Islamate, that Ottoman, Safavid, and Mughals. So these are like subsystems under the broad system. One problem is, okay, I mean, system as you define as units interacting in a systemic fashion, perhaps, units interacting. But your definition of sovereignty of the units would have to be very clear, because the European system was operating under different kind of conceptions of sovereignty. Ultimately, paramountcy, as you said, was sovereignty. Whereas this concept was not that prevalent in the Islamicate. To a certain extent, Black has some reason, I mean, because when he says that it's a Darul Islam versus Darul Harb, which is why the Caliphate did not recognize separate sovereign states. So you are, on the one hand, treating, probably, I mean, this is just this thing,
Sure.
as if the same definitions apply to all the major global systems that you have described, but in actuality it wasn't so. So isn't that a problem?
If by sovereignty we mean that...
Or was there a definition of sovereignty in Asia at all? I mean, in India?
Not in the European sense, if that's what you mean, but in a basic sense, if sovereignty is meant that the domestic laws within this realm, it's not necessarily a territory. The borders, as we understand it today, which clearly come from the European conception, this kind of definition of borders did not exist. But this does not mean that there was no idea of what is internal and what is external. The frontier zones were certainly hazy, and there we can question what is Safavid and what is Ottoman or what is Mughal, depending on which frontier zone that we are looking at. But they had no... There was an internal realm which was separate from an external realm where the external power could not interfere, was very much present. So
these are different definitions operating in different subsystems.
But for me, that is not really a problem, simply because I'm not trying to talk about sovereignty as an issue. I'm just talking about unit behavior under hierarchy or anarchy. So I'm taking a level of generalization beyond that. Because otherwise, even the Cynic system, clearly the idea of sovereignty is very different in that system from the European system. It's true that the European system's idea of sovereignty becomes eventually our idea of sovereignty. But I still think that at a very basic level of generalization, we can talk about these things.
Rajiv?
I'm wondering if the Mughal Empire was the first empire in India which helped in Islamicate or develop a system, or to say South Asia region, you said, because Gupta Empire was the golden period in Indian history, ancient India, and at that time the amount of contribution in all fields, whether it's mathematics or other parts of science, technology, or even foreign relations, was immense. In terms of even area coverage, their empire was extended until Iran, Afghanistan, the whole Indian subcontinent, Myanmar. They had relations with China, the religious impact, and when India talk about the current time, talk about ancient linkages, 2000 or 5000 history of connections, it's about Buddhism. So is there any study which looks into this matter, even in terms of literature? Kautilya's book is a classic book in IR theory. So is there any study which looks into this kind of comparison? And then you gave the reasons why you opted for Mughal Empire. Why not Gupta?
Precisely for the reason that when people talk about India's historical traditions, they ignore the Islamic period, and I think that's incorrect. There is a politically motivated way of looking at things as opposed to an intellectually driven inquiry. Because clearly, I think there are important questions, like, for example, the paramountcy issue, which people associate with the British. But I'm arguing in this paper that it actually begins with the Mughals, and in fact, it was consciously copied. But on your other question about the Gupta Empire, first of all, I want to start by saying that I don't believe in golden ages. If Gupta Empire was a golden age, then I guess people from contemporary South India would disagree because it did not really affect them. I'm guessing that the Chola Empire and Vijayanagar might perhaps be the golden ages. So there's no historical India with a golden age in my mind. There are different epochs where different states are dominant. But my point was that even if I take your point that the Guptas controlled all of South Asia, which I don't think they did, by the way, but even if I agree with that point of view, there's a 1,000-year gap between the decline of the Guptas and literally a 1,000-year gap between so the Guptas declined after 500 AD. The Mughals began their reign in 1526. For that 1,000-year period, there was no centralized Indian state, if you like, in the subcontinent. In my mind, actually, the Delhi Sultans paved the way for the Mughals, because on the one hand, they fought the Mongols in what today is Pakistan, Afghanistan, and on the other hand, the Delhi Sultans under the Tughlaqs actually went all the way to Madurai, thereby creating such a geopolitical space for themselves, which the Mughals actually built upon.
Anish?
My question is that regarding this research, you choose to end your study at 1750. So my question is, based on these systems that you have showed us, what do you think actually lacked in the system that could have actually saved the Mughal Empire?
Sorry, you didn't get the last bit.
Sorry.
Save the Mughal.
Yes.
What could have
What was it that was lacking in this system that if the Mughal emperor had maybe done some reforms that he could have saved his empire?
So again, it's a counterfactual, and like I said, I'm not an historian, but I will give you my take based on my study of it. My personal feeling is that the Mughals, like I said, were okay with a hierarchical order in South Asia. They did not want to necessarily combine all of South Asia into one political unit, and I think that's where they made a mistake. Had they gone with a hierarchical system only as opposed to an imperial system, had they not extinguished Bijapur and Golconda, their finances would not have been stretched to the limit. I'm giving you one reason. There are multiple reasons of the decline of the Mughals, but I think this was a crucial one. But also, the Mughals, towards the tail end, suffered from internal crises. They did not have a proper succession rule. So it wasn't given that the oldest son would be the next emperor, say, for example. They always had to fight it out. And we know that patricide and fratricide, the Mughal history is rife with such violence. So succession crises mixed together with stretching of finances, I would say.
Okay, is it okay if I add on? Yes. Okay, so we do know that in 1858, when the Mughal Empire actually fell, those in the Mughal court, there was a group that actually moved down to south to join the courts of the Nizams of Hyderabad, and we do know that the Nizam actually, his ancestors actually rebelled against the Mughal Empire. So do you think, based on that, if maybe there was some form of decentralization, then maybe this Islamicate could have lasted longer? And sorry, just to add on is that I think this part you didn't answer is, what was the reason that your study ended at 1750? Was there anything significant there?
I did not. So in my paper, I traced the evolution of the system very carefully, so after 1720, the system becomes particularly weak. So in 1707, the last great Mughal emperor Aurangzeb dies, and then the succession crisis comes back with a vengeance in that period. But after 1720, the different provinces of the Mughal Empire essentially become independent for all practical purposes. Nominally, they are still ruling in the name of the Mughal Empire, the Mughal emperor in Delhi, but in a practical sense, they are independent. And the big proof of this devolution of the system, if you like, is that in 1739, the Persians attack Mughal Punjab and Delhi. And none of the Mughal satrapies in other parts of the subcontinent actually send their soldiers like they are required to if they were really a part of the empire, so to speak. No, under Nader Shah. And just to give you an example of how rich the Mughal empire even then was, so the Nader Shah looted only Punjab and Delhi, so not all of the Mughal empire, but taxes were cancelled in Iran for the next 3 years. And all of this is happening before the British period. Post 1739, there are 7 big invasions of North India again from the Afghans. So by the time 1750 happens, and 1757 is when traditionally colonialism begins with Bengal and all of that. So I wanted to end it before that because I did not want to talk about that period. But my point was that by 1750, because of internal decay and wars within the Islamicate world, Iranis and the Afghanis, the Mughal Empire had crumbled. In a nominal sense, it lasted until 1857. In fact, the East India Company until 1803 was a vassal of the Mughal Empire, at least in theory, in the documents until 1803 that the East India Company signs with the Mughals. They are ruling Bengal and Bihar and all those other provinces in the name of the Mughal Empire. Only in 1803 everything changes. And after that, the Mughal emperor is pretty much a pensioner of the English East India Company. He's captive. He's free, but only to roam in his palace in Delhi.
2 more. Jivanta and then Shuli.
Thank you. That's a very interesting research you're doing and very valuable. Out of curiosity, how would you define yourself as what kind of IR theorist? On the one hand, it seems you're doing quite deductive work. At the same time, your case would speak towards the need for inductive sort of research methods. So how would you pitch yourself?
So I'm very much a deductive scholar because the way I actually did my research was, and perhaps I should have mentioned, it's an excellent question, and perhaps I should have mentioned this at the very beginning. So I have this case study, this elaborate case study which I had to construct, but my theoretical generalizations come as a result of explicit comparison with the Sinocentric world and also the European system. So I'm not inductively drawing out hypotheses by just studying the Islamicate system. I'm comparing it. My generalizations come out of a comparison. So I'm a deductive scholar. But clearly these are trans-historical generalizations, and they speak to the present. So in that sense, you can call me an inductive scholar, but my hypotheses don't come out of inductive reasoning. They come out of deductive reasoning.
Within the grand schools of IR theory?
Yes.
Don't you have to be a bit more explicit?
No, I disagree with that. I believe power matters, but if by that somebody wants to call me a realist, it's up to them. I'm a structuralist, I will give you that, but let me tell you, Alexander Wendt was also a structuralist. So I'm a structuralist. I'm not saying ideas don't matter, but for me they play a secondary role. So I have a more eclectic approach towards IR, theorizing, I guess.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. My question is more of a clarification because I'm very interested in the concept of Wakil, which you said inspired the British India, and from my knowledge, it still exists right now. So, as you say, you're very interested in process tracing. So, how did it differ from, like, the process of Wakil? How did it differ in British India and in the Mughal Empire and in the contemporary world?
The big difference between the way this institution was practiced by the Mughals and by the British was that the British had a form that they made people sign, the subordinate states, whereas in the Mughal case, when the Mughal Wakil actually reached the subordinate court, it was understood that the Mughal interest had to be considered. Clearly, the Mughals could not at all times discipline them, whereas the British, because they were backed by a different economic system, industrial might, they could discipline all the subordinates. So it was a legal system. I would say, in that sense, actually, I would say that the Mughal Wakil system was an institutional normative system, whereas the British Wakil system was a legal institutional system.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Manjeet. Amazing the sweep of history that you did in 1 hour with the kind of detail. Really amazing stuff. I never knew you were doing the Mughal history. Just two questions, Manjeet. One is, I'm going to push you a bit. Evelyn Goh is written on East Asia and systems of hierarchy. How does your work relate to her? Agree, disagree? Why? No. Second question. You say that you are a structuralist, and I see your earlier work. And I think comparing the Sinocentric and the Islamicate and the European system, that's fine. Don't you think the last part, the contemporary one, is pushing it quite a bit? Was there? I mean, did you feel that someone said you need to make this contemporary? So now, the last part you say, oh, actually, this what happened last time. So China now behaves like that. I found that you really trying to stretch the point there. No, that's why I'm asking Manjeet, why do that though? Because I thought everything, then the last part seemed to be like, my hand's not reaching, but I'm going to just trying to try. Sorry, just I put it out
Sure,
there.
no problem. That's an excellent. I'll begin with that actually. The reason is that hierarchy in my talk was about the Mughal hierarchy in South Asia. If I'm supposed to compare it with anybody, as far as IR theorists are concerned, the only hierarchical system that exists, or at least where work has been done, where I can actually speak to the literature, is the Sinocentric system.
We're not
And,
talking about a contemporary one.
Clearly, they have implications, and my big problem is that. I'm very pleased to actually inform you that my paper has been accepted in Security Studies. It will be coming out in June 2017. And I'm very happy to say that this is the first piece of IR research in an IR journal. I'm not talking about history journals or area studies journals. In an IR, there's one piece by George Modelsky on Kautilya, published in APSR in the 1960s. This is going to be the second one that talks about India. India, again, not Republic of, but India. So my problem was that I had to talk to the Chinese case because the only articles that seem to be getting published also have to do with China.
Yeah.
So there's a theoretical reason on hierarchy that's the only literature I can engage.
Correct.
But then in a contemporary sense, I have had an issue with Eurocentrism being replaced with Sinocentrism. So I wanted to talk. And like I said, the centricity issue is not really a part. Only now network theory is bringing it in IR, and it's not a part of mainstream IR. So I thought it was important in that sense. And Evelyn Goh's work, I like Evelyn Goh's work a lot. And to put it in a nutshell, her argument is that, first of all, Southeast Asian states have agency, so small states are actually creating order as opposed to order being driven top-down by the big states. I love that point. I have no issues with that point. The second point is that the Southeast Asian states are actually creating consciously creating a system that gives the US and China a stake in the region, but also to a lesser degree Japan and India a stake in the region. So she has a four-tiered hierarchy. So the way the political, economic, and military engagement being led by Southeast Asia is being done is to keep the US on the top, China number 2, Japan and India number 3, and Australia, South Korea number 4. And so it's a hierarchical system. And my argument, again, I have no problems with that argument per se, if that's what she's saying Southeast Asia is doing. My question is China going to accept being number 2 to America, and are Japan and India going to accept being number 3? That, and what happens when the power equations change? Today, if you take a simple realist point of view and calculate military power and economic power and technological power, the US is number 1. In Asia, at least. Arguably, China is number 2, and Japan is number 3, and India is number 4. But what happens when the power equations change? And there's a psychological element as well. India will not play second fiddle to China, and China will not play second fiddle to the US. While her analysis tells us what it is today, I see conflict ahead.
Thank you. Any other questions? Surya? No? Okay, fine. So just that leaves me, see, We got 5 minutes, so we can go have a cup of tea outside. Thank you, Manjeet. I'm sorry, I was supposed to tell everyone that this article has been published by Security Studies. I forgot,
No
so
worries.
my apologies. So people,
No. Like I said, I'm actually working on I'm working on a sequel. So my second project also comes from this paper, in which I'm theorizing how regions get created in
that period.
international relations. And so my second paper will talk about how South Asia itself got created as a region within the system. Because Barry Busan's argument is that regions of contemporary world politics were international systems in their own right historically. And I don't think Southeast Asia or even South Asia were full-fledged international systems.
Yeah.
They were regions even in the pre-colonial period.
There could be a subsystem.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
that's true. And so people who want to read the full thing.
15,000 words.
Yeah, just
yes.
15,000 words, not too long. Can read it in Security Studies.
Drop me an email, I'd be glad to.
Yeah, but be mindful of the copyright saga and all that. Yeah,
I've been told I can share it now.
Okay, all right. So Manjeet, this very nice book that I'm going to pass you. It's called Being Muslim in South Asia. I thought it's quite apt given what you were presenting today, by Robin Jeffrey and Ronald Joyce Sen. So we always give people a book to go away. So this is the book. Thank you, Manjeet.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all the questions as well, because I will bring in your comments in the sequel. I have a series of papers on this issue prepared over the next several years that I plan to work on. But
Thanks, Manjeet. I think there's tea and coffee outside. Thank you, everybody. Thanks. Thanks, Manjeet.
Wow.
thank you.